Hi, welcome to Addiction Recovery Place, the podcast that is championing addiction treatment professionals around the world. I'm very pleased to introduce today's guest, Nick Pecenica. Nick is the founder, caseworker, and counselor at A Better Way, which is located in Indiana. They offer outpatient addiction counseling, group and individual sessions, probation packages, and case management, in-person sessions, and also mentoring. They work remotely across the state in Indiana. Welcome to the Addiction Recovery Place, Nick. Thanks for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Much appreciated. Thank you so much. Before we start, Nick, I'd just like to read this quote from your website that truly captures the work that every addiction professional does. So those who've been given a lot, much is expected every day. I sit amazed at my full belly, relatively good health, wonderful people in my orbit, and capacity to continue to pursue my dreams. I marvel at the growth I've watched my clients achieve, whether it's in their confidence, their evolving language, or straight through to what their families testify as meaningful changes. There's nothing else like it. Everyone deserves to feel that way. We want to feel recognized, heard, and like you, deserve to feel whole. That's an awesome quote, Nick. And I just wanted to say that because that really does, show the work that every addiction treatment professional feels. And I certainly do. And I really related to that when I read that on your website. I think that's a really beautiful bit of writing there. So I just wanted to share that with our audience, just to tell them a little about you. So Nick, tell us about yourself and your journey and how you got to starting at A Better Way.
For sure. Several years ago, I had a friend who was working at DCS, the Department of Child Services, and he was watching me kind of struggle to do things entrepreneurially. And he's like, "You should come join me." And I'm like, "I am not for that button down world. I will get fired in 2 minutes. I don't have the language and the whole aspect." So I got into something adjacent to it, doing visit supervision and casework. It was just kind of my first kind of brush with that world.
Mhm.
Um, from there, I transitioned to DCS. I spent a few years there, went to another casework kind of spot and visit supervision spot. Then kind of lingered for a little bit before ended up working in Putnamville Correctional.
Okay.
And then I worked for a remote counseling operation for a little over a year after that.
Mhm.
And then my experiences through all of those things have led to culminating in starting A Better Way.
Mhm. So what year did you start your training in your career, Nick?
For addiction counseling.
Yeah.
That what year is it now? 2024. So 2020-ish.
Yep. That's quite a long time.
Yeah, sorry, I don't get like strict timelines on these things. It all kind of melds together.
Yeah, sure. Kind of a bit shocking when you realize how long you've been working in the field, doesn't it, really? So I certainly felt the same way. So, um, can you tell us a little bit about your services and obviously about your colleague Hussein and tell us about the services that you provide your community in Indiana then?
So primarily we try to focus on the addiction counseling part, the outpatient addiction counseling. I've noticed that there's a lot of people who already retain a lot of skills or a lot of really solid means of getting through their life, getting through their day, but they're just kind of disorganized, or they're not really aware of the language they're using that's kind of keeping them stuck, or particular influences in their life that maybe need to be handled a little bit more deliberately. So I try to position us into a place that like give people over hills that maybe in their own life feel very, very complicated, but just require some outside perspective to kind of help get a little more organized.
Mhm.
Hussein, he right now is currently working on his doctorate in, I believe it's family and child counseling or something like that. I forget his specific thing, but he's working right now in a clinic, in an inpatient clinic in Martinsville.
Okay.
But he was pre-med for a little while, I believe. And I'm not 100% sure how we ended up at DCS, but we met there and then have kind of chased each other into these different environments, working similar roles until I was like, why don't we just try to do this by ourselves? Because each of the environments we were in was basically learning experiments on how not to do the work.
Yeah. Okay. So how long have you been working with him?
I've been working with him since 2020.
Wow. Heck,
My desk mate over at DCS.
yeah. Okay. So, how's your service funded?
So right now, I am very, very lucky to have a friend who is primarily allowing us to keep the lights on. She single-handedly gave us a nice donation and is uh, doing a recurring monthly kind of thing.
Mhm.
Otherwise, just being very, very budget conscious.
Yes.
It doesn't take a lot to run a remote clinic. So as long as I can keep like the digital forms paid for and the licensing up to date and the insurance, all that kind of stuff, I can work that into pretty much any concurrent life budget kind of thing. So just by keeping the bills really low, I live in the middle of nowhere. I need $4,000 a year to keep my lights on. So the business is kind of packed into that.
So you have no salary yourself. It just comes from funding or donations. Is that I'm just
Yeah, I'm functionally working for free until people donate or somebody like after we've had a few sessions and things
yeah.
and they're like, "Oh, yeah, this is worth something." And then like I had a client who seemed to do really well really quickly
Mm.
and like surprise sent me like $200 for 3 sessions and I was like, "Cool, I guess I'm worth $66 this couple of weeks."
Mhm.
Like an hour or whatever my
So the funding goes up and down, obviously, depending. There's no steady stream of funding for you.
Yeah, no, not at this point.
Wow. Okay. That must be incredibly stressful for you, but congratulations for providing the service to your community. That's pretty incredible. And
Honestly, it's funny because like I've noticed that like the stress levels
mm,
that get referenced a lot in this work. And I have very consciously organized my life in a way that makes it so stress is immensely manageable. Part of me living the way that I do is that I can go into a fair amount of debt. I can work pretty much any job and pull in a little bit of cash and still be trying to hopefully have the work speak for itself
mm,
more than make a lot of sacrifices in what it takes to kind of stay stuck to an organization that maybe isn't doing it like how we would like to do it.
yeah, yeah. So at least you know that you're working to your own um, kind of way, and you're not restricted to working with an organization that has very strict rules, I guess. So that must be pretty nice to have that kind of freedom as well. So over the time of you running a Better Way, Nick, what changes in drug use have you seen, and how have these affected your community?
I've mostly heard. So I sat in once on a report from the Monroe County coroner, and she was talking about the massive influx in fentanyl, and not just fentanyl, but carfentanil and all the different derivatives,
Mm,
and how there are like the kits that are available to test what you're taking don't even cover everything that you might see.
right.
And she was like, "This is killing people all up and down age brackets, income brackets. It does not discriminate." And the numbers had like doubled year over year, if not more, from I think she went back to like 2018 through till I think the last time this was like 2023. So other than just fentanyl showing up everywhere, I've had a lot of people just anecdotally testifying to the harm reduction medications that they're taking, saying that this is just like another drug to them. That's not everybody, but that's certainly a large plurality of people
Mm,
who are like, I'm just now addicted to this.
wow.
So to the extent that any harm reduction medication is taking over, that's what a lot of people are referencing as their new drug of choice,
Mm.
so to speak. But those are the two primary ones.
So people are calling fentanyl their drug of choice.
No, people are calling people are saying that they're functionally addicted to Suboxone or methadone.
I get you. Okay. When we first spoke last week, Nick, you mentioned that fentanyl is pretty much found in any drug. Is that including marijuana? Is that? Can you tell us a little about that?
I've had one client in particular comes to mind who was talking about getting new customers as they were switching to other kind of drugs and things, and talking about putting fentanyl in weed, in hookahs or weed hookah,
Yeah.
getting friends and things otherwise addicted to other substances. That I was like, still fascinates me to this day. I talk about this guy a lot
Yeah.
because it's, I was driving him to an appointment and I'm like, also the person who brought him his children. So I was like, you know who you're disclosing these things to. But yeah, it's a wild world out there as far as, and it's usually a handful of people that are the primary sources of the greatest proportion of things. So
Mm,
if one of them get the hairy idea about how they want to implicate a wide portion of the population, it's that quick. You think I'm taking something, or I'm taking something even from my regular dealer, and it's changed and you don't know. Now, Indiana is surrounded by 3 states where weed is legal, so I think most people now are getting it from, like, dispensaries across the border.
Yep.
But for a while there, it wasn't so clear.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was really surprised when you told me that. I was actually quite shocked that this is this is going on. I've never really come across this before. So, have you noticed more people accessing your services due to addictions to opioids, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic? So, I hear drug use has risen since then because of lockdown.
Yeah. I have found more people testifying to how much the need is,
Mm,
less a willingness or facilitating of getting them to us. There are systems in place and there are companies in place that are I don't know, grandfathered in, or the ones that are popular, or the ones that everybody knows, and we don't provide harm reduction medication.
mm. Yep.
And so that's what most people are gravitating toward. That's why I've kind of discovered, the longer that we've been open, filling an even more specific niche of those people who are like, they genuinely want to get off their Suboxone. They don't want to be strung along for years,
Mm,
getting comfortable with where they're at. Then they come to us when they want to deal with that heightened anxiety,
mhm.
when they want to, maybe I'm thinking of a client in particular who maybe got into their addiction late in life.
Mm.
So they already had that strong foundation and they're not like kind of reinventing the wheel. And they just, again, needed that reorganization piece,
Yep.
or somebody to talk to that wasn't, part of their chronic conditioning.
Mhm.
Uh, we tend to be able to help those people the most.
Yes.
If you're, just starting out, if you're kind of really laying that foundation, or if you need that whole kind of community thing, we don't really have that yet. And especially because we're not like in person, building the rapport sometimes can take a little bit, extra. But
Mhm. Wow.
yeah,
Mm.
I would love to have more people. I definitely interacted with a lot of people I think would be appropriate for our level of care,
Mhm.
but the system that exists already are servicing another kind of layer of where people are at,
Yeah.
in their perception of the recovery, and kind of getting over that barrier is its
Yeah.
own kind of game.
Yeah. Where'd you get your referrals from?
Right now, I've got a handful of colleagues that I've worked with who have sent me referrals that, they know how I work and they recognize which kind of clients are going to be appropriate for us.
Mm,
We've just done general flyering and outreach like in town. So sometimes people will call us just out of the blue
mm.
and say, "Hey, I saw this," or from people that I've previously worked with who kind of pass along and say, "Hey, they helped us." Maybe that, if you're at that stage where you want to get somewhere,
Yeah.
go to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. And doing these podcasts, I've discovered many different opinions around harm reduction. So tell us your ideal explanation of what harm reduction is.
Harm reduction for me fundamentally is keeping people alive. Um, Anything else that gets kind of like lumped into it
Yep.
is somebody else's kind of interpretation. And so,
Perfect. Yeah.
keeping people alive, great. You can't work on a dead person. Whether or not that constitutes people becoming more accountable, responsible, developing their agency, feeling like they have a grasp on what has chronically plagued them or otherwise,
Mhm.
whole different question.
Mhm.
So you can operate under harm reduction and do all sorts of added or different kinds of harm.
Yep. Absolutely. Yep.
But yeah,
I love that explanation. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. You mentioned your work in courts and case management. Can you tell us a little bit about this and what you do and the commitment and this level of work you have to do for your clients going through the very long criminal justice process that you have here in America?
when it comes to any kind of court stuff, it's one of the more straightforward things, at least for me. If it's not written down and it's not in some kind of report, or if I didn't have to like, affirm it, like under oath, like it doesn't exist. So if I need to, say somebody's been in treatment, I will just say that. I'm not giving opinions on anything else. So that's relatively straightforward. And then it's like I volunteer independently with other organizations that work through the courts that I can't overlap or like
Mm.
associate necessarily with my company. But yeah, when it comes to court, I find that a lot of people are just mostly confused by it. And if you can kind of cut through the noise, especially if it's maybe family court, and or just give them an endorsement and backup and reassurance of like what the work that they have been doing with you, that cuts through a lot of the noise with our courts.
Mhm. So how long do you work with people with this? I mean, what's the longest period of time that you've gone through
I've
stimulus?
had people have attempted to subpoena me 4 years later. Um, yeah, especially I could have cases from back when I was at DCS. Like I could have cases from 2018 that might try to reach out to me at some point, depending on what develops like in those families' lives.
Mhm.
Now, whether or not I'm willing to respond to them,
Mm.
different question.
Mhm.
And 99 times out of 100, I'm going to say if it's not in my report already, I got nothing else to say.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. So you still have people from 6 years ago that you were working with suddenly get in
Yeah, and
contact with you and say, "Hey, Nick."
he got from even further because he had more independent kind of clients and stuff for a while, and he did more of the straight therapeutic interventions at some of the companies that we worked for. So yeah, you never know when you're going to get a call out of the blue or something in the mail.
Wow. That's that's quite incredible. Um, last few questions for you, Nick. What future plans do you have for a better way?
In my perfect world, I get that handful of people who have either been personally affected by the work that we've done or who can, bankroll the basic floor of keeping our lights on. And then we start building on the community aspect.
Mhm.
One of the interviews that I watched of yours where with the people with all the money, and we have some of those kind of like rich people playgrounds around Indiana too,
Mhm.
is the community aspect. We try to fix these chronic kind of rots in society that develop these addictive coping strategies, and we don't replace the things that we actually need psychologically and socially. And then they're just like, oh, okay, we've reduced harm. No, we need to build. When I was working at my the previous company, there were some really, really good groups. I miss those people so much.
Mhm.
But they weren't like going out and bowling together. Some of them were. Some of them lived close enough or knew each other, and they would like interact outside of the group. But it was like these would be really good social groups to be reinforcing each other and building on these skills and getting to where you really want to go.
Mm.
But the infrastructure is not there, and a lot of the people are working themselves to death or are otherwise, obligated in other things. I want to be able to say like, look, it's not just us talking in circles about whatever our particular kind of issues are. It's literally building on these new skills and putting ourselves in these new, physically maybe uncomfortable spaces so that we can develop deeper as people.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. So where can people find you or contact you online to discuss your services, Nick?
So my website is abetterway.club. All of my personal information, it'll reach directly to me is on there. I think plastered on 7 or 8 of the pages.
Yep.
Uh, but yeah, that's the most efficient way.
Excellent. Excellent stuff. And lastly, is there anything I've forgotten to mention or that you'd like our audience to know about?
Uh, I was challenging myself to come up with something that you hadn't
Yes.
included earlier before this, and I didn't come up with it. Nothing was glaringly out. So I
Okay.
think you've done a pretty good comprehensive look at what's kind of going on.
I think your work speaks volume, Nick, and I really do take my hat off to you and Hussein for what you're doing for your community. And I'd like to also personally thank you for coming on and taking the time out of your very busy day today to come and talk to us on the podcast. And maybe in 6 months we can have you back on again to see what else you've been up to. That would be great. But thank you very much for your time today, and definitely keep in touch. All right.
Hey, I appreciate you having me, man. Like I hope I have something worth saying in 6 months to have what we've built or gotten to.
Well, you've certainly added a lot of value to this, and I really appreciate it, Nick. And your expertise and knowledge is quite astounding, and the work that you do is just wonderful. So, keep doing what you're doing, and keep providing that great service to your community because it's much needed. Thank you very much indeed, Nick. I appreciate it. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.